Oh, you want to clap? Okay.
Don't think we can synchronize it, right?
You want to? Okay.
And then if you want to clap too for this camera. Alright, thank you.
Okay.
We're rolling. Hello. Welcome to the Bitcamp podcast. Today we're interviewing
Professor Kauffman, Christopher Kauffman, if you're my friend, but Professor if we're in a class together.
Okay, sounds good. And I'm Samir.
And I'm Kai.
Okay, sounds great. Alright, first of all, how's your day going?
Good.
Excited to be here.
It's an interesting day. I got to talk to a student who wants to go to RU. I had a faculty meeting. I had unusual Friday office hours that were jam-packed. And then I just met with a community advocate, which is when you have to do an honor review for someone who's been naughty. They assign you a community advocate to help you prepare for the setting. And so it's an unusual Friday. It's usually a lot more chill than this, so I can catch up on email and stuff. So there's a lot of unanswered email. So that's, I think, it. But it's beautiful outside. And so the walk over here, to McKeldin was just outstanding.
Yeah.
So.
Can you tell us about yourself, who you are, what you're doing at this university?
Well, that's a big question. I'm older now, and so there's more story behind it. How or where would you like me to start, or is there any guidance, or is this, when I was a lad, or...
How about let's start with this first one. How and when did you start teaching?
Sure. I got my start as a teaching assistant. I was an undergraduate student at the University of Minnesota, and I really enjoyed the classes that I was taking in computer science. I kind of stumbled into computer science, which has been interesting to hear others stumbled into it as well. But I applied to be a TA. I applied to be a TA for the C++ course. It was the first programming class I took. It's for scientists and engineers. And they're like, yeah, we're not going to put you in that. We're going to put you on the CS class for majors, which was taught in a language called Scheme. And so I was like, oh, okay. And so I did that, and it was great. I really enjoyed what I did. I did it for several years until I became a grad student, and then TA'd for various things along that way. Eventually, I got far enough in the grad program and knew I wanted to have teaching be a part of my career. And so I asked, could I teach a whole class instead of just being a teaching assistant? And the guy, Phil Berry, who was in charge of that stuff, he was like, yeah, as long as if you're going to teach this class, you have to take this Preparing Future Faculty course, which is, if you're a grad student, you want to be a faculty member, it's training for you at that point. And so I took it, and it was actually a really good experience, and it helped me to prepare for the class. I taught discrete math for one of 2 times during the summer, and that was a fascinating experience, and then did an ad hoc gig, and then I finished grad school, so I went for my first gig to teach at George Mason, and it was a teaching-only position, didn't involve any research responsibilities. And that is what I've been doing ever since.
So we're going into CMSC's 216 questions now.
Yep.
And the first one is, what is your favorite topic to teach in that class?
I don't have a favorite topic in it because to me it isn't topic based. It is a connective tissue to understand. All these things interrelate in some fashion. So I think there are particularly joyous moments that occur, as in from the time students confront the use of assembly and look at this thing that's so ugly and weird and foreign and alien, and then over the course of 3 weeks, it's oh no, I get it. It's just it's actually not that hard. It's a simpler kind of thing, annoying to use, but nonetheless understandable in that fashion. Hopefully most students, go through that transition part. And that's just joyous to me. It's the thing that you've coded in unknowingly, up to this point, where everything you write translates down to this level. Now you understand it. You have hit pay dirt. And, in CS, there's this, it's turtles all the way down kind of thing. And no, there's actually solid ground under there someplace of that. But anyway, to see that transition, then we're oh, I get it. And now any language or environment I go to forwards, it's going to have features that look like this because that's the machine that we're operating on. That feels good to me and is really rewarding. It's annoying then when I'd see YouTube videos, is why is assembly even a thing anymore? Or who codes in C anymore? C is so dead and so forth. It's Right. Like you just, illustrated your ignorance of like the state of the world and why things are the way they are, and come take my course, and then, maybe you'll be less ignorant about it. So, sorry I don't have this is the best thing. It's like, it's like bit shifting is the best thing. Or like, I don't know. I mean, all of it on its own is boring, but combined is what makes it interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd say there's like an increasing number of students who are saying that 216 is not applicable to the job, or they don't think it's valuable. Or like, what would you say to that, or how would you sort of combat that, I guess?
Sure. I answer it by analogy in many ways. I start with like general analogies. It's like the question is like, is physics applicable to you? Like, and the one answer is like, no, it's not. I don't do anything in physics. Yeah, but gravity's pulling on you right now. Like forces acting on you are causing you to fall down and so forth. So some basic understanding of physics like might make your job a little bit easier. Is psychology like important to you? It's like, no, like I deal with machines. It's like, sure you do, but you have team members, right? And they're people. And so it's like, and so some of these things are just like sort of foundational and like they pervade stuff there. And 216 is more niche. I mean, it's more like asking, is it important for a doctor to know how to take blood pressure? Like, maybe not, but it's sort of a foundational things like, well, if you didn't have a system that could do that, like, could you measure someone's heart rate or use one of the little squeezer things to take blood pressure? That seems sort of like a basic thing that doctors should know how to do in terms of their bedside manner and attending to things there. It's like, well, my nurses do that, or like my PA does that and stuff. It's like, yeah, but basic capability kinds of stuff. But I think it's even like the analogies miss that part of it, sort of thing, that if you don't come to grips with some of the things that go on in 216, for instance, forever afterwards, there'll be mysteries. And we don't work magic, we work computers.
Right.
They're machines, they're mechanistic, and 216 is designed to answer certain questions about why do they work the way that they do? Like, what's the underlying principle that makes it impossible to do this, costly to do this, and cheap to do this? And so I'd argue back to students who talk about that and say, what are you trying to do? And then explain to them, well, that's how 216 affects that thing. And you can't get away from that, because if you want to run it on a computer, then it's going to be subject to that set of rules. If their answer is like, oh, I want to manage people, it's like, okay, maybe 216 isn't exactly the right, but it'll make you a better manager in that when you're asking someone to do something impossible, you'll understand their answer, like why it's impossible to do this. I can't make blanket statements to refute that, but any specific statement about that, I think I could countermand. It's like if I could get in a conversation with someone and they're willing to listen.
Right. Okay.
That makes sense.
You started teaching 416 parallel computing
This semester, yeah.
Yes. How's that going?
It's going pretty well from my perspective. I asked one of my TAs who happens to be in 416, I was like, oh, well, how is it going? And he just stared at me blankly. I guess that kind of bad. I think it's a very interesting course. It's a sort of natural successor to 216 for those interested in performance and expanding in computing systems. But it is sort of different in its characteristic. I've taught this kind of class before, both at George Mason at University of Minnesota, and the presentation in 416 is very much like what I did at CSI 5451, the parallel computing course at Minnesota. And so I'm not an old hand at it, but I'm not a complete noob either. And so I think it's going about as well as it went there, that students are struggling with the difficult material, but parallel stuff is not easy, but most of them are sort of mastering it and showing like some enthusiasm for it even. So
Okay, that's great.
Then. Yeah. I'm wondering if you're doing the same with 416, if you have exams for 416.
Yeah.
So for 216, you let students use laptops during the exam.
Yeah.
Why do you do that?
I made this decision really early on in teaching. I couldn't give you an exact rationale at that time, but here's my post rationale that I've used like ever since then. Generally in computing, I like it as a discipline because we only need a small amount of things to do a lot. You need a small amount of like code ideas of loops and functions, some input-output stuff to accomplish this like wide array of tasks of producing games, processing information, doing machine learning, etc. But tied up in that is just many, many like fragile little details.
Yeah.
And it's the exact kind of opposite thing. I mean, humans are good at those sort of like, oh, a small amount of primitives, and we're very creative with it. And we're terrible at these small amounts of like the details and so forth. Remembering, what was the order of that argument set there? I know there's a function that does this, but I can't remember the name for it and stuff like that. Like, I know I've done something like this before. I just can't remember how often it went. That's what I do all day, every day. It's what I did in grad school. It's what I do as a professor. And so having access to your resources just seems to reflect the reality of what you do in the real world anyway. And to try to align an exam with that as much as possible, like that resonates with me philosophically. I don't expect you to remember what's the exact calling semantics of the write function in the Unix API. Instead, like if you've used the write function, you have an idea about what is right, and if you've used it in a project that you've completed and you understand how that project works, then it's like, of course, on an exam it's easier. Oh yeah, I use this here. Oh yeah, that's the way it works. Okay, and I change it on this setting like to accomplish this slightly different task, but a lot of it is carryover there. And so that's why I thought it just makes sense. Like, let's have open resource exams where if you've put the work in to construct these somewhat elaborate projects, to practice on these problems that you've been given and so forth, then why would I rob you of that, past set of resources when I myself use those every time? Like, if I'm going to write an exam, I'm going to look at my old exam and see, what I did here. If I'm going to work on a variant of a project, it's like, what did I do last time? Like, oh, let's change this part and twist this thing and so forth. It would seem disingenuous for me to, do it this way, but then say, no, you can't do it that way on an exam.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. I can respect that. I think that's really nice.
Well, folks observe that the open resource exams, like, well, how do you stop people from cheating and stuff? It's like, well, there are two parts to that. Like, it's actually, there's lots of things they can do that isn't cheating, and that's fine to do. And so there's just sort of broadly there. And the boundaries for that, they're actually not that bad to enforce. You just watch people. Like, you walk around and like, you're Googling. I'm sorry. Like, you're Googling in the middle of the exam, that's out of bounds. And so, like, you're going to be sanctioned for it. And so seeing those things, it can be difficult, but we have a fairly good track record of catching folks who are intentionally trying to subvert that stuff.
Okay.
That checks out. Actually, so now speaking of cheating, in a way, I think this would be like the last career question before we move on to some of the more fun ones. So we heard from some people that you allow students to use AI now for projects. Is that true?
It is.
Okay.
So up to this spring 2026 semester, the policy around collaboration with humans and AIs was that you're not allowed to do it. Work on your projects individually and refrain from using AI to generate your code. I think fall 2025 in my career will go down as like that was the turning point where there was such broad use of AI in 2016. It triggered so much work for me on the one side of like, I have to police this now. These are the policies. If I want to be fair to those who play by the rules, I have to seek penalties for those who have clearly subverted those rules. Of folks who, in my mind, it's just so obvious that they used AI. Because like, how do you use a function like that? We never talked about it. And you, in the middle of our like disciplinary board hearing, you can't explain what that thing does. And yet you're claiming, oh, this is my code and then I wrote it. Like when you talk about it in class, you can't explain it. It's like, it has no business being there because it's more complex than is needed. It's like, just own the fact that you cheated and move on. Like it's easier that way. But it broke me. Like, so there were so many folks that are, using it and then claiming, no, I didn't do it. It wasn't me. That I just don't feel it is fair to students in my current courses that I have to devote so much time to policing that stuff after the fact now, that I care to do it. And so the policy now is open collaboration, both in 216 and 416. Do what you want. Chat with your neighbors. Now, share code with each other. In the case of 416, you can submit as a group. And
really?
If you're going to copy each other anyway, like why not just have one submission so that we do that? But that's more appropriate, I think, for a higher numbered 400 level course anyway. But I don't think it's appropriate for 216. So folks still submit their own stuff in 216. But you're free to collaborate. And if you want to submit exactly the same stuff, like fine. Just make sure you understand what you do because those projects, which used to be worth a lot more, are worth 2% of your grade now.
Wow, really?
Yeah. And now 80.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, like each project is worth 2%.
Oh,
So
wow.
their fire project is like 10%
okay.
overall. It's like and 80% of your grade is going to be exams. This is actually in a model that several folks in the department have started. Justin was the first one who like advocated for it. It's like follow it. It's like because we're just sick of like you are playing by the rules and accepting the fact that I only got an 89 in that project because I didn't know how to finish this part, but I'm going to own that. And you are, using AI and get 110 on it. And like, then you get C minuses on exams. And so like, how do I square that? Now, like, it's not worth the time anymore because it's really hard to tell too. AIs have gotten better. If you want to use AI and fool yourself into thinking you understand, then go ahead. You're just going to get hammered on the exam. And my only real evidence about this is a grand experience in some way to see, like, will that work? My only real anecdotal evidence is a student who came into my office hours, like, after exam one happened, and it's like, yeah, I don't think the exam went well. And it's like, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Like, you should wait till the scores come out, but what makes you think that? It's like, well, I really couldn't think of any answers for a lot of the questions. It's like, well, like, how did you prepare for it? It's like, well, I did the project unit thing, so how did you do the project? I think I might have used AI too much. It's like, okay, let's talk about that. Like, here's one of the functions you wrote. It's like, can you explain it? No. I'm like, what do you mean no? It's like, no, I don't know what that code does. I'm like, but you submitted it as your own. It's like, yeah, but I had AI write it for me. I'm like, well, here is our problem. And he's like, yeah, I can see how this is a problem. It's like, and so that little anecdote is affirming in ways in that the policy is set to like, you're an adult now, like you're in college, you've done the equivalent of a year of college programming. If you want to fool yourself into thinking, I know this stuff because I had outsourced it to an AI or a friend that, I copied code off of, fine, fool yourself. Just know that, the music will stop at some point, and those that get chairs will be the ones that have put the work in. And the exams, I think, are going to be reflective of that.
Great analogy.
Oh, you think so? Yeah.
Dude, the bars dropped.
Yeah, well.
So what are your thoughts on AI itself as like a learning tool or students who use it? Do you think like it overall is bad? And I know like a lot of workforces too are starting to almost require AI. So like how do you contend with the fact that like students might actually need to learn it?
So we'll start like broadly with like we don't know anything about AI yet. Mm-hmm. I mean, we kind of know what it can do, but we don't know what it's going to do to us. In the same way that like when Facebook came out in 2003 or so, like it was this new thing and we kind of know what it can do. Like it can connect people and people spend time on it and so forth. But we didn't know what it would do to us. And 20 some years later, we know what it did to us. Like it kind of screwed some things up. And so I'm hesitant to say this is what I think AI is going to do to us yet, because it's really early in that. My anecdotal evidence that I shared already is like it can fool people into thinking they understand things when they don't, because it'll produce those answers for them, but they have no real ownership of it. I really don't think I need to teach students how to use AI. Right. You all are smart, and it's shockingly easy to use. You say, hey, I have a question. Do you have an answer? Why, yes, I have an answer. And the answer is such and such and such and such. It's like, that doesn't sound right. That sounds a little bit weird. Are you sure it's not this? Oh, you're certainly right. And I was so mistaken. It's like, well, that doesn't sound right. Oh, you're so right. It's like, I'm sorry I deleted your whole code base and replaced it with a non-functional thing. It's like, so that part, it's shockingly easy to use. And so folks who advocate, we need to teach students how to use it, it's like, I'm not sure they understand that students know how to use it. I mean, students are doing it in the middle of exams and getting caught doing it, so I think they have a pretty good idea, like how to manage those things. What I don't know, and I don't think anyone knows, is like, how do you teach students to use AI well? It's too early for that. What's an appropriate level of use, and how do you dodge those pitfalls of tricking oneself into thinking it's you understand when you don't? It's actually the machine that's doing stuff there. I also think that the intelligence of AIs is overblown, that they're incredibly powerful tools that regurgitate things that have already been done. And most things that haven't been done yet, that are truly new and different, AIs are going to suck at it. And anything that's been done but there's not training data that you can steal off the internet, they're not going to be very good at that either, because they just don't have the training data for it. And so I think it's really important, folks, to talk about, when they talk about AI, I would rather say LLMs, which are a tool for regurgitating things, and they're incredibly useful, and they'll become more useful, but it's a tool that's going to fall into our utility belt, just as IDEs did, just as code completion did, just as testing frameworks did, just as myriad other tools within computing have become, part of the toolkit that you use to address problems. Mm-hmm. And perhaps AI is somewhat more pervasive than that, but LLMs as a tool then, they are just that. They're not going to replace human ingenuity, human understanding, because they have no conception of the world. They just say probabilistically, I should say this next. Maybe we all are as creatures, that's what we're doing too. It's like, I see you smile, and it's like, oh, I'm saying something good. I'll say something more like that over there. Yeah. But I kind of think we as creatures have something more intelligent than that to bring to the world. And so we don't have general intelligence yet. We have good regurgitators. And they can be tremendously useful, but I just don't know how we're going to find uses for that, what appropriate uses are for that yet.
I was reading about this, that LLMs and AI don't have a physical understanding of the world, right? So when you ask them to make a bridge for you, right, they don't understand the actual difference between 10 tons of concrete or 10 million tons, right? They just know because they've read that a million times, right? They don't have an implicit understanding. Yeah. So I guess one thing I wanted to ask is, right, one thing I also saw is that AI is facing a data problem right now. They're running out of data to train on, right?
That's why all the memory, RAM is prices are going super high right now.
Yeah. Oh, they're running out of tier. It's so sad for them.
Yeah. So, I guess what you were saying earlier, right? Do you think it's worth it for students to learn how to use AI well to help their learning and I guess in a job in the future? Because I got asked at one of my interviews, actually, they asked me, how do you prompt an AI when you have an error message? What do you do, right? Okay. And I feel for some people that might be a good skill to learn.
Okay.
What do you think?
No, I mean, I think that always you have to rectify your philosophy with the realities of the environment that you're in. Mm-hmm. And so if students are finding, hey, I go to these interviews and they're asking me, how do you use AI to address these things, and they don't have answers, then certainly learn some things about AI in order to be with that. Or I go to these interviews and they do all these leak code problems. I want to get those jobs, so do some leak code problems to practice for those things. Yeah. And so I would not discourage folks from using AI or becoming fluent with it. Rather, especially if there's market forces saying, if you want these jobs, then come with these skills, then acquire those skills. But I wouldn't treat it as anything more than it's a particular skill right now. And I'd also be extremely skeptical about investing in any particular AI thing as this is, the end all be all of it. Yeah. On account of this is a rapidly evolving field. The tool that's hot today may be out of style tomorrow. The company that provides this may be bankrupt in 6 months because they can't get enough RAM. They ran out of data to train on. They weren't competitive with the other models. So just be cautious. I mean, I'm an Emacs fan because Emacs is long-lived in that way. And so that which lasts longest serves best, as is said, but I don't know for sure. One thing that I think is really fascinating to point out, that, again, you have to square the philosophy of this against the pragmatics of it, is that companies will say, we want you to be able to use AI. We want you to be able to do that stuff. Do they actually let you use AI tools during your programming interviews, your technical interviews?
No.
They've started doing that.
They've started? Really?
They do? Okay. So at the point that they would actually start doing that and say, we want you to be able to do this, and we're going to allow you to do this here. That's when I'd say they are philosophically aligned. But for a long time, they've been saying, you need to use these things. Oh, but during the interview, you have to solve it yourself. We want to see if you actually understand stuff. And that's just man. I mean, it's like do what I say, not what I do, like, kind of stuff. So I'm encouraged to hear that they're starting to, relax that. If you actually want me to show competency with this tool, then have that be as part of the interview process. And it's definitely signs then to practice with this in some ways.
Right.
That seems to follow your philosophy with letting students use the laptops. Or
It is. Yeah. Now, I personally in classes am interested in, do you understand students? Like, can you, generate answers to this yourself? And so for a long time in the future, there's probably going to be no AI use there because I think a fundamental understanding by the human of this stuff is more important than, can I prompt a machine to spit back an answer that, is known already to it? Because that internal knowledge, that factoid, becomes part of this model of the world that the human has that I don't think the LLMs do. And that model of the world is richer and more interesting and more creative than what can come out of those machines. I mean, this colleague was talking about like, I just checked and like the LLMs now, they can one-shot the programming competition problems from 2 years ago. It's like, first, like, those are probably public problems, so they've definitely been absorbed. So the LM memorized that thing and can regurgitate a solution to it. Second, question for you: do they let LLMs be used by the students in the programming contest? And he's like, oh, let me check. Oh no, they don't use that. Well, then who cares? Because what we're interested in is like, human, can you solve this? Are you creative? Are you crafty? That part, and I think that's what's interesting. Is like, it's kind of like asking like, this guy in a scooter, he can outrun Usain Bolt, like, because he's on a freaking scooter. He's like, who cares? Like, that's not a sort of a discussion of human competency. And I think for a long time in the future, we as humans are interested in other humans, so that's like what we're going to be interested in.
Okay. That's
a very good answer.
Oh, yeah.
Third clap, yeah.
This is the first time we ever did like a third clap.
Yeah, let's do it at the same time this time.
1, 2, 3.
There we go.
Oh, clean. Short basketball-related question. Somebody, you know who it is.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Somebody from our organizer team really wants to ask you, LeBron or Jordan?
So I grew up with Jordan, so I just have to go with that. And like, I found out, I think, about LeBron James like long after he was actually like a thing, like that many people knew him. And then finally, Chris like pulled his head out of his protein structure predictions. Like, oh, there's this guy named LeBron James. Like, what does he do? He plays basketball. Cool. I'm gonna go back to the it's like, but like when I was young, like Michael Jordan was the thing, and so I know very little about him, and have found it interesting. Like most basketball players, like after his basketball career ended, he becomes the spokesperson for Hanes, like Hanes underwear. And like in my later youth, like Shaquille O'Neal was big, and like Shaquille is just a consummate like advertiser for things now. And so, so I think between those two, I just have to go with Jordan because I'm somewhat more familiar. So.
That makes sense.
Okay. He's gonna be very upset to hear that.
Oh, really? All right.
He's like the biggest LeBron.
Yeah,
I mean, if it is less upsetting, it's like, I don't care. Like, if you think the right answer is LeBron, sure. Like, that's fine. So.
Yeah, all good. Okay.
So we go
Can you answer, like, why do people ask that question?
I think because they're two of like the greatest players from different eras, so people like to compare them, but it's very hard to give a direct one-to-one comparison.
Sure. Okay. But different eras, different environments. And so forth.
Exactly.
That makes sense. Okay. Cool. Right.
Yeah.
I have an opinion, but I'm not going to state it.
Okay.
We're going to ask some favorite stuff now. So what is your favorite meme?
My favorite meme? There are a lot of good ones. Okay, this is like a cash miss because I haven't thought about memes for a while. I'll have to think it was like, I mean, I'm known to use like some memes like occasionally in coursework.
Yeah,
if you take a course with me, there might be a meme on your final exam that you have to decode in some fashion. So I guess since I picked like the rage guy for the icon for 216 on Canvas, like maybe the rage guy is just like that just its use is like is sort of fun. But I guess the other one that I really like is the one does not just walk into Mordor like a thing, because when I was a college student, I went to that in the theaters, and it's like such an epic movie, and then to see it like have this longevity to it, like that line apart is, and it's used and overused and stuff, but it's still lovable, like, because it's Boromir. So.
Okay, wait. Who's your favorite Lord of the Rings character, then?
Oh, okay, that's tricky. That was like off the cuff, right? You didn't, okay, that wasn't like a prepared one. Okay, favorite character.
Keep in mind, I only read up to like, I finished the third part in the Two Towers. I'm still reading it right now.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, it's funny because like when you said that, I immediately thought of the films because rather than the books. It's been an age since I read the books, and I read them when I was a youth. Then the movies came out, and there was a huge to-do about that, and they became so much more the lore became so much more culturally relevant. And so when I thought of favorite character, I think of like the film portrayal of it, and I'd maybe have to draw a distinction then between like the film versions versus the prose versions of it. I think when I was like Gandalf was my favorite in reading it, because like it's a wizard, and like when you're a kid, like wizards are just cool, and he was like a wizard, like maybe the prototype of all wizards in some ways, like sort of mysterious but still like lovable and accessible in ways. And I think the film portrayal by was it Ian McKellen did it? Like I was like, man, what a guy! He plays Gandalf, plays Magneto. That's fun stuff. And he's like a stage Shakespearean actor too. So at any rate, so I guess Gandalf, maybe that's a tired sort of trope there, but like he was the one that appealed to me as a kid, both there and then maybe in the films in some ways. But I think one of the parts that people liked about those films is just like they're just such like wonderful characters. They're rich, they're interesting, they're accessible, they have fun dynamics between each other, and so it's like good writing that I think was made ever so much more lively, like on the film too. But I mean Aragorn in the films I think really appealed to me a lot more. Like Viggo Mortensen is like a great actor. Like he's just a little too handsome to I think reflect how Aragorn was supposed to be sort of awkward in the books. Like he's just not that like not that good looking, but Viggo Mortensen. I just thought it was really interesting because he's a badass like fighter in the films, but you don't think of him as wise. But I think that was the original portrayal. Is he's lived, he's seen all these things, and he deserves to be king because he knows stuff and can guide with an even hand. So
and he's like Strider. He was able to like heal I think Frodo with like knowing which like
exactly
the exact
save his life
or something. What is your favorite video game?
Ooh, favorite. Okay, so I grew up in the 16-bit era, like Super Nintendo mainly. And so I think the one that just resonates with me was Chrono Trigger. Like, if you've never played it, this is a Squaresoft one. It has time travel, it has a talking frog, it has fantastic lands in the sky and desolate, like, post-apocalyptic stuff, and one of the best bad guys, like, that's ever been in an RPG before. So, I just was obsessed with that game with, it's 10 different endings depending on when you decide to take on the bad guy. It's 16-bit, it's just beautiful graphics, and even as I think about it now, I like go back to this moment when I was at the mall and I bought the game and we were on a trip. So I had the game in hand and I couldn't play it yet because the Nintendo was back at the house. But I would just pour over the manual and look at the pictures, and I was just so excited to go on this adventure when I got there. And so it was just a killer game. Like, close second is Final Fantasy VI, which was called Final Fantasy III in the US. It was also a 16-bit RPG, also a sweeping story, and probably an equally good bad guy, like in that one. So like it's just, those like obsessed me as a kid. And then when things went 3D, like after that, like then 64 and the PlayStation stuff, I was so tuned to like two-dimensional worlds, like I couldn't make sense of it a lot. Like I'm terrible at first-person shooters. When I played Final Fantasy VII with like Cloud and Tifa and such, like it's like they're just blocky polygons. Like I have no sense of like emotion or anything from them. And even though I think that's the much better remembered like Final Fantasy, but that's out there, and I just haven't played any since then. So, so those two, Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy VI. close second to that pairing is Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past, which is a Super Nintendo one there. But I love Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. I'm playing Silksong right now, and finally I got the bad ending, and now I'm going to go on to try and figure out how to get good endings. And so, like, they're just immersive, really interesting worlds with beautiful art associated with it, and rich sort of lore and fun mechanics. So.
Right. I was going to ask, because a lot of people told me that you really like, at least you mentioned a lot of like Zelda games or something in your classes.
Yeah. I mean, I've played almost all of them, if not finishing, at least like partially up there. So, but I mean, the history of computing is just deeply influenced by gaming too. I mean, because the first exposure that folks had to computing in the 80s was like video game consoles, and the same processor that powered the Apple IIe that I cut my teeth on, like in terms of the limited amount of programming you do with the little logo turtle thing drawing pictures, it was the same processor that powered the the Nintendo and the Super Nintendo in part there, the MOS 6502. So I mentioned that in lecture in 216. It's like this is ancient 8-bit processor that was just well loved and set the stage for all these developments to come there. So I see those things as inextricably linked, and that the vast majority of us, like, we enjoy games, and so one way that you experience computing is through those games out there.
Yeah.
Are you gonna come to Bitcamp?
Yeah, I actually proposed a workshop. I'll do the Shell Slayer thing that I've done in the past.
Oh, that was the question I was going to ask when you were talking about Lord of the Rings earlier. Because, I went to one of your...
Connections?
A little bit. Or I think more like Dungeons & Dragons. I forget what was the actual connection. But, actually, Purpose told me that you hosted at Technica a Shell Slayer workshop, and I went to one of your Shell Slayer workshops back in Halloween of last year or something.
I did it. I've done it a couple times for the ACM student chapter.
Right. Yeah. So
can you explain what it is?
I mean, it was this thing where the first or second year I was here, I think it was the second year, some of the ACM folks were looking for a speaker to come to do something at one of the ACM student chapter meetings. And they asked, because a couple of them had been in my class in 216, and asked, hey, would you want to come and give a talk or something? I was like, I don't really have that much to talk about, but if you want to do something, this is kind of an idea that I've been kicking around, and this would be motivation for me to get off my butt and actually, create it in some way. And so the Shell Slayer is a tutorial. You start a little Docker container, which starts a shell, and you're stuck inside this shell, and there's a daemon in the shell, which is funny because it's a traditional Unix term for a long-running process. But this daemon, this long-running process, is actually more daemon-like. It's nefarious and printing the screen and is apparently causing mischief. The point is to try to learn some of the classic shell commands and how to be more proficient on the command line in a Unix environment, which is a nice job skill to have because Unix command shells pervade the wide world. But the activity around learning those is supposed to be sort of fun, where it's there's this little spirit that lives in this folder, and it wants you to arrange text files in the following way. So if you can learn some commands that are helpfully displayed in here to arrange them, then it will give you an answer. And the answer is one of the names of the daemon, that you use all the names together that form the root password, and then you can kill the daemon with the kill command, in that. So it's supposed to be sort of tongue-in-cheek and drawn paladins and demons and spirits and stuff from a D&D kind of lore, or Diablo kind of lore. But it's mainly about doing shell commands and stuff, and just coming to grips with how many there are. And amazingly, they're small. They do one or two things really well, but then they can be strung together in interesting ways to accomplish somewhat complex tasks that would take you 30 lines of Python to get done otherwise. As long as there's one person, and there was one person that was super this was really interesting, then that's enough. That's fun. So we'll see how it goes at Bitcamp. It's again a hard thing to sort of sell, because it's not obvious immediately what are we going to do, and is it going to be fun, kind of stuff. And I don't know, it varies a lot on whether it's fun or not.
Are you still going to role play? I was when the demon appears, you're gonna be oh, dang it.
I mean, that's sort of tongue in cheek, but the take it as worth. I'll try to ham it up a little bit.
Yeah.
It's interesting, I think, because when you give a presentation like that, my dad likens like, oh, doing lectures like that, I think of it as almost like you're putting on a show. And like, if you put on the show, like you get people engaged in an entertainment way, then they tend to be somewhat more tied to actually wanting to learn the stuff that's involved. It's not just completely dull and boring. And so when I give a presentation like that, for that, I try to be a little bit more, give it some pizzazz and such. But it's exhausting. So if I don't bring my A game or my sword to the Bitcamp version, if you could forgive me.
Okay. I mean, yeah. We'll definitely put this on the podcast so a lot of people will be able to.
Okay.
Maybe that'll generate some more like.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you want to learn some more about how to do Unix commands and just like, hey, I've heard about this grep thing, like, or I didn't know there were loops in a bash shell, like, then yeah, it's really good for that. It'll give you a brief tutorial on stuff, and also then a takeaway is like, oh, you can practice it again and just get the little guide that's associated with it and stuff. So.
Will you connect with your students on LinkedIn or follow them on Instagram?
Oh, this is so I think I have an Instagram account, but I actually am not on Instagram anywhere.
Oh, okay.
I only got an Instagram account once because some student probably was like, you want to get on Instagram and see what they're saying about you at Minnesota. And so I was like, okay, this sounds ominous. It was just some like gossipy crap, and like, so it didn't matter. But but that's why I had an Instagram account, and I haven't logged in probably 5 years. My wife apprises me to certain things if I need to know about it, because she does a little more social media. The LinkedIn thing is really interesting. Like, I vacillate back and forth on that part. If I would be happy to connect to like a TA that I've actually supervised and have observed their good work, like on LinkedIn. But a student who's taken one class with me, who wants to be connected on LinkedIn, like, that feels awkward to me, because I still treat LinkedIn as like this thing where like, oh no, I actually know this person, versus like, oh yeah, I'm connected to them, but I don't know who they are. It's like that was like the model for social networks I had when I was younger, and I've just never gotten past it. I think it's maybe a healthier model because it kind of more reflects your physical reality, but I know that's not a universally held opinion about how social networks should work there. So if you want to connect with LinkedIn, I'd consider it twofold. Request, talk to me about it. Yeah. It's like, okay, I mean, if I'm like writing a letter of recommendation for you, like that sort of makes sense. We'll get to know each other a little bit better. And also tell me that you're going to try to connect with me, because I also only log into LinkedIn every 3 or 4 months, and only do if I get some email notification that there's something worthwhile in terms of attention there. I spend shockingly little time on social media except to browse a few Reddit subreddits.
So you're basically not on social media as much?
I mean, I have no Twitter X account. I have a Facebook account that I haven't logged into in 4 years. I have an Instagram account that I haven't used in 5 years. I have a Reddit account that I never comment on anything. I just enjoy being able to read about mechanical keyboards. I mean, I barely even use like Slack. The faculty have a Slack where they exchange information, and I'm like, oh yeah, I should log into that and see what's been said. I miss a lot of things on account. I just do everything on email because that's what I was trained on. And then when people ask me, it's like, well, why don't we use Slack? It's like, what does Slack do that email doesn't? Well, it does this. It's like, yeah, but that's just sending an email. Yeah, but it does this. It's like, but that's just sending an email with an attachment. And they're like, well, I guess it doesn't do anything different. But it's been so interesting to me to see that, like, the proliferation of different communication platforms, the culture and style around it. That like Slack is treated as this sort of like quick question and answer thing, and stuff. But email is more formal in that way, which is hilarious because like, when I was younger, email was like whatever. It was like you write whatever you want in emails and stuff. I guess maybe it's thought of as more formal because it's older now, but something like that. And the really synchronous or real-time stuff was like AOL Instant Messenger. It's like, oh, you're typing things. It's like you have 3 different people you're typing to and stuff. And it's fascinating because they all do basically the same thing. It's just the human perception around it that becomes sort of different about it. The thing I hate about it is like, I don't want to have to be on 6 different platforms. Yeah. I have enough other things to tax my mental load. It's like, send me an email. Like, that's what I check. And so if you can meet me where I'm at, then, we'll be friends. So. So there, I guess if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, like send me an email first.
Thank you for coming onto the podcast.
It's been a great pleasure, yeah. But yeah, it's been great fun, and I'm glad that students are interested in learning about professors as people. Like we're all people, we're all weird people, because you don't become an academic unless you're a little bit twisted and strange, but lovable for that strangeness, I think, and I'm no exception to that. So thanks for your interest.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for coming on.
My pleasure.
Yeah. I'm Samir.
I'm Kai.
And this is...
Chris.
We'll see you in the next one.
Sounds good.
Okay, so I guess more questions.
They're not gonna notice, but they're not gonna notice this. Okay then.
So if you could have a metaphorical billboard that could say anything on it, and it would be shown to everyone in the world, what would the billboard say?
Yeah, I feel a little bit like I got to prepare because this is a question that you've asked before. But I thought about this. It's a tough question. I think what I'd fall back to is know thyself. It's like a Latin expression, nosce te ipsum. I was introduced to it at some point. It shows up in the Matrix, like the original Matrix. Like the Oracle and Neo are talking, and she's like, you know what that says? It means know thyself. And I think that a lot of philosophers have like sort of come back to that part. Like the unexamined life is not worth living. So spend time introspecting, like find out why you're doing the things you're doing, and if it really reflects like who you want to be. And so I spend like time like getting to know myself. It's weird because you'll probably have a moment in life where you're like, oh, I'm me. And like you just realize like I have this whole internal world. Like I didn't really consciously think about it. Now I think about it. And it's weird to know yourself then and find out how peculiar you are, but then helps you relate to other people and realize, oh, like you just haven't found yourself yet. Like you're still like waiting for that. And maybe I can help you with that. So.
Okay.
So know thyself. That would be my billboard.
Good answer.
No.
Perfect. All right. I think we can end off there then.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.